to start a new chapter in math today. The subject of this next section of our math book is all about fractions, which I think are really fun. They're a fun math topic. You know, we always talk about how math is like its own language. So when we talk about fractions, we are using new math words. Okay, so fractions are all about things being divided into equal parts. And then when they're divided into those equal parts, they get new names, okay? Let's look at this. I made some examples for you. This shape that I made here, it is not divided into any parts. So it is called one whole. One whole. That's what this is. One whole rectangle. Now, this, let's look at another one. This rectangle, same size as the one whole, but this one has been divided into two equal parts. Okay, when you divide it into the number of equal parts, that becomes part of its new name. So right here, put a 2 here because there are two equal parts. 1, 2. And the new name this fraction gets is 1/2. 1/2. Okay? The two halves together make this one whole rectangle. Right? Let's look at another one. Now the rectangle, same size, but divided into a new number of equal parts. 1, 2, 3. That number of equal parts becomes part of its new name. We'll put a 3 there because there's 3 equal parts to this rectangle, and this is called, its new name is 1/3, right? 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. 3/3 together makes one whole rectangle. Let's do one more. Again, this is the same size of rectangle, but divided into equal parts. A different number of equal parts, so we'll count it. 1, 2, 3, 4. We'll use that 4 to be a part of its new fraction name. 1/4. 1/4. All right? Fractions are fun. They're a fun math thing because they show up all the time in regular life. Now that you're thinking about it, you might notice it more. One of the places that you're going to see fraction numbers like this is in cooking. If you ever help any of the grown-ups in your house cook and they're telling you how much of something to put in, there are frequently fraction numbers in that. Actually, my daughter Harper was making a treat last night. She was baking us some brownies and we wanted to put frosting on top, but we didn't. We looked at a recipe, we read all the amounts, but we didn't have enough sugar at our house. So we decided we will take all of the amounts of that recipe and make them in half. So Harper had to look at all of those amounts, cut them in half, and then all of her amount numbers had fractions in them. So the one thing was 1 whole cup, 1 cup of sugar. Well, then she did half a cup of sugar. Okay, and things like that. So fractions come up a lot. They're fun to learn about. Now that you're becoming familiar with them, you're going to notice how often you encounter fractions. One of the things about them, though, is it's not just about a shape being broken into parts. They have to be equal parts or it doesn't count the same. All right, let's look at the worksheet. Let's do a few of the numbers in your worksheet together. 247 and 248. Okay, so they have to be in equal parts for it to be a fraction. This is a circle. And how many equal parts is it divided into? It's divided into 2 equal parts. So we fill in that blank, 2. Now they want to know which math word do you use for that? And they list them there for you. Halves, thirds, fourths. What are these what's the math word were you learning for this? It's halves. Halves. Okay, that's an interesting one of those that to make it a plural changes the spelling a little bit. 1/2, 1/2. 2 equal parts. And the math word we're using for that is halves. Here's a square. It's divided into equal parts. How many equal parts? do you see there? You see 4 equal parts. Okay, so that makes it, the math word we're learning is fourths. And that's right there on your, it gives you the options and spells them for you right there on your worksheet because they know you're learning, being introduced to a new concept. Now let's look at number 4 together. This is to help you remember that for it to be a fraction, it needs to be equal, divided into equal parts. So there's little dots underneath. The first part of number 4 is mark each equal part, or mark each shape that is divided into equal parts. So it's not precise because I just drew it on a wipe-off board, but you can see that this first one is in 4 equal parts. So we'll mark it. Marking in red. It's a little bit hard to see on the thing. Now this one is in 1, 2, 3 parts, but are they equal? They're not equal, so we're not going to mark that one. That's not showing us a fraction yet. But this triangle is in 2 equal parts, so we'll mark it. And this rectangle is in 4 equal parts, so we'll mark it. Now the second part of your instructions are for you to color each shape that is in fourths. Okay, so these are 2 different shapes. And the equal parts are also different from one another, but these are both shapes that are divided into fourths. So you'll color both of them. Isn't that interesting? It can be the same name, fourths, even though they are different shapes. And your equal parts are also different from one another. Okay, on the back, you'll have more opportunities to experiment with that and identify shapes that are divided into equal parts or name what kind of parts they're divided into. The very last review part is asking you to review some measuring that we've done before, but it's been a little bit, so you might need to find a ruler to do that last bit of your worksheet. Okay, I'm excited to introduce you to fractions. I think you're going to really enjoy it. All next week we'll be doing work with fractions. Okay, in science, we've been learning about magnets. Yesterday, you guys filled out a chart. You made scientific observations about which type of things were attracted to your magnets and which type of things were not. And first you made predictions. You tried to guess. I wonder if this will stick. I think that it will, or I think that it won't. And then you tested your predictions by just seeing if something would stick to the magnet. Right? We did things that were plastic, did not stick. Things that were metal usually did, but not always. Okay, so, and you filled out, you didn't just wonder, you predicted, and then you recorded your observations after you tested your predictions. So that's really good scientist work. Now today we're going to open our science books to page 174 and 175. We're going to read together about magnets. We did experiments with them yesterday. We made observations about it. Today we're going to read about it. Magnetism. That's the heading of your page 174. Magnets are objects that can cause a force. Force. That's one of our words. They can push or pull certain metal objects without touching them. The force of a magnet is called magnetism. Okay, that's an important word. The force of a magnet is called magnetism. So do you remember when I was showing you things yesterday I set them out on the little tray, and sometimes even without me getting close, the magnet pulls it. Look, this magnet is pulling it up. Okay, now a magnet can push or pull. It can cause a force. I just think magnets are amazing. Magnets come in many sizes and shapes. They may be bars, discs, or curved like a horseshoe. Some areas of a magnet have stronger magnetism than other areas. The areas of a magnet that have the strongest magnetism are called the poles. Okay, so I want you to get a pencil and underline that sentence. That's an important sentence. The areas of a magnet that have the strongest magnetism are called the poles. Magnets have two poles. They're called the north and south poles. On a bar magnet, the poles are labeled S for south and N for north. So sometimes you can have a magnet that actually tells you where the poles are, right? Now, when a magnet we just took off of our refrigerator, or one that's in a toy, or even these ones that I have, they aren't labeled, the poles, so I don't know. We don't know until we play around with it where the poles are. Okay. Have you ever tried to put two north poles of two magnets together? No matter how hard you try, poles that are the same will not stick to each other. Like poles repel or push away from each other. If you put the North Pole and the South Pole close to each other, they will stick to each other. Opposite poles attract or pull toward each other. So when we look at this magnet and you see it just hop up, it wants to connect. These are opposite poles. They want to attract each other, okay? Now, if they are the same, so I don't know which this is. It's not labeled. I don't know if it's north or south, but I can't push them together. I'm pushing and it's trying to get, it won't go together. It's trying to get to the end where they can attract. But right there, I can't push them together. I was trying this, experimented with it on here. If I could push it away using it, and I can push it for a little bit. Isn't that cool? I can push it. Once when I tried it, I pushed it and then it actually flipped itself over so that it could. There, I pushed it. And then it tries to flip over so that it can attract. So magnets are amazing. God created the forces in our world. Learning about these forces can help you do your work well. Doing your work well is one way to glorify God. I think when we're playing with magnets and noticing which things attract and which things don't connect, it almost feels like something magic, right? Because I'm not touching it, but I'm affecting it. Oh, and now it jumped. Flipped over, so now it can connect. It almost is like magic. But you know, it's not magic. It's just something amazing that God created in our world. And people use magnets in all different ways. We use magnets just in simple ways, like on our fridge to hold up photos, or in toys. Magnets can be awfully fun to play with if they're in a magnet block or something like that. But scientists and engineers and inventors and builders use magnets in all sorts of interesting ways. So it's a really amazing way that God made the world, and I think it's really fun to learn about. And I want you today, now that we've read through this chapter, I want you to turn to page 151 in your work text. Or it might be called Activity Manual. It's where your worksheets are. And I want you to find the definition of each of these words. I want you to find the definition of each of these words to prepare for your quiz that will be on Teams today, right? So you're going to need to look up these answers or listen carefully to me, okay? Force is a push or a pull. You can find the answer to that on page 164. That's where that definition is listed. Motion is what happens when an object moves. You can look that up for yourself on page 166. Friction is a force that slows down or stops motion. That's on page 168. Friction, a force that slows down or stops motion. That's like when I showed you I rolled a can across just a clean table, and then I tried to roll a can across a carpet. The carpet caused friction and it slowed down and then stopped the roll of the can. Gravity is the force that pulls all things towards the center of the earth. That's found on page 171. And we encounter gravity and are affected by gravity all the time. We just don't think about it, right? If you were riding a scooter, you can put yourself in motion by pushing with your feet, right? But if at some point you stumbled or you hit a stone or something, you don't just float off your scooter, you fall to the ground. That's gravity. That's the force that pulls all things towards the center of the earth. Oh, I forgot to write one. Weight. Weight is the measure of the force of gravity on an object. Weight is the measure of the force of gravity on an object. Now today we read about magnetism. Magnetism is a word to describe the force of a magnet. Okay, the force of a magnet. That's found on page 174. The force of a magnet. So we're putting together another science word in our understanding of that. And poles, the poles are the parts of the magnet that have the strongest magnetism. That's also on page 174. So I want you to write down your definitions, find them, listen to me. I told them all to you. You can also look them up in your book to review them, write them on here, and that will prepare you for your quiz. So turn in your definitions and take your quiz on Teams today. All right, so for our reading, we have been learning about stringed instruments, specifically the dulcimer. We read a story about a dulcimer, about a little a child who learned to play the dulcimer, and we watched a video. I sent you a video of someone playing the dulcimer. I don't know about you guys, but I wasn't very familiar with it, so I enjoyed learning about it, seeing what it looked like when someone else played, and then we read a whole article all about a dulcimer, what it's made out of, what the sound is, the different types, okay? Today, there's a project in your reading book. It's on page, the instructions for it, let's see, let me make sure I'm giving you the right page. The instructions for the project are on page 161 in your reading book. It says, make a stringed instrument, okay? And your instructions say to find rubber bands and a shoebox and 2 pencils, and then it gives you a how-to instructions about how to make a dulcimer. So I wanted to try this. I wanted to see about how fun would it be, or not a dulcimer, but just a stringed instrument, okay? Something similar that you just made at home. Well, the problem is I couldn't find a shoebox or rubber bands, the big kind. And because of stay home all the time, I don't go to the store very often, and I couldn't go find a shoebox or rubber bands. But it made me think, what are some ways I could be a problem solver with what I have at home? And honestly, I think if you do have rubber bands, you know, the bigger kind that are really stretchy, I would use a shoebox instead, because that's going to be a lot easier to cut on. But I found these are the type of rubber bands I have at my house. Maybe some of you have these too. This is from that little craft kit where you can make bracelets out of it. I can't remember what its name is, but we have zillions of these in my house. So I thought, well, these are rubber bands. I just have to find a really small box, right? So I found a small box in the medicine cabinet, and I put paper on it, and I drew the lines like it says. Now, an important step to making this instrument is putting something underneath the rubber bands once you put the rubber bands on. If you don't, it just sounds like this. It doesn't make a music sound. They recommend a small piece of wood, or if you don't have a small piece of wood hanging around, then you could use a pencil. Well, because mine is tiny rubber bands on a tiny box, I'm using little flat Lego pieces. So I'm sliding that in upside down so that the Lego bits don't run into the rubber bands on both sides. So now the rubber band is up off of the box. I'm going to add another rubber band, maybe a hot pink one that might show up on the screen. Okay, and so now with some rubber bands across a box with Legos holding it up off there, we have what's sort of like a stringed instrument, and when you pluck them, you can hear a little sound. Isn't that fun? So I want to encourage you, even if you first look at that instructions and think, I don't have exactly a shoebox, this many rubber bands, or whatever, you could still be creative and maybe you can still make something like a stringed instrument. And if you can't find even these, if you don't happen to have these type of rubber bands, or you're just having trouble, I thought of hair bands too. I didn't end up using them, but I thought, well, maybe you could do something with hair bands if you found the right size box. I think that could also work. So I want to challenge you to be a problem solver, think about different ways. And if you can't end up making a stringed instrument, but you still want to experiment with making an instrument, go with something different. A percussion instrument, if you have a certain size of box and some wooden spoons, maybe that could be like a drum. If there's an old empty jar and you want to put beans or rice in it and you shake it, that's a shaker. And part of it is just, it's fun to learn about instruments. We've specifically been learning about a type of stringed instrument, which is why this little craft with the bands. But it's also just fun to learn about instruments because that's one of the ways that we make music. And I'm so glad that God made us with the ability to make music and enjoy music. It's one of the ways that we can celebrate things. It's one of the ways that we can worship God. We can use music. There's music in the Bible. Our reading today in your reading book is from Psalm 33, verses 1 through 3. And let's look at it in your reading book. I forgot to write the page. This is page 163 in your reading book. 163. Let's look at it together. We'll read it more than one time, okay? Psalm 33, 1 through 3 says, "Rejoice in the Lord, O ye righteous, for praise is comely for the upright. Praise the Lord with harp. Sing unto him with the psaltery, and an instrument of 10 strings. Sing unto him a new song. Play skillfully with a loud noise." Okay? So that verse, these verses that they've printed in your reading book, those are from the Bible. And you can tell from some of the words where it says, "O ye," or "unto," or "comely for the upright." You can tell from some of the words that it's from a different version called the King James Version. So that some of the words are not words we use anymore, but it can be fun to do reading even with words that we're not familiar with. It's good for our minds. It's fun to appreciate words in all different ways. I wanted to also read it to you from the ESV. This is probably the type of Bible you have at home, or some of you have NIV. I think it's fun to read words from the Bible in all different versions. I think that's fine. It helps us appreciate the words and their meaning. The Bible, when it's translated into English, it's translated from another language. So some of the ways, the translations we might choose to read, it has to do with what language they were translated from. Okay? Well, I'm going to read you from ESV. This is the same verses, so let's listen. "Shout for joy in the Lord, O you righteous. Praise befits the upright. Give thanks to the Lord with the lyre. Make melody to him with the harp of 10 strings. Sing to him a new song. Play skillfully on the strings with loud shouts." Those verses are just saying, it's good to praise God. And they list instruments in here, and they are instruments that have strings on them. Play skillfully. I don't know, I wonder if any of you play an instrument. To play skillfully, you have to practice. And so they're saying people who have practiced and they love to sing, let's use those talents to sing for God, to praise him. Okay, so I look forward to seeing if any of you come up with a way to make an instrument at home. Whether that's a stringed one like this, where you're having to use what you can find around house, or whether you make a rhythm instrument like a shaker, or a percussion instrument like a drum, using what you can find. I really look forward to hearing about what you come up with, the ideas you come up with, right? And I'm glad we read this together. I want you to do your worksheet here, page 331 and 332, to review what we've been reading and work on your reading comprehension. Okay, today is Friday. So we made it through another week, and it's awesome. I love all the things we learned. I love all the hard work you put in. And today is the day that you need to watch the lesson video and do the homework that's assigned. You have math and science and reading. And then you also need to get onto Teams and do the quizzes that I will post there, okay? It's very important to get all that done and get it turned in so that I can see all your quizzes and see your hard work and then get it entered into the grade book. I appreciate how you have all been working hard and you come to the class in the morning and you watch the videos and you turn in your homework. I think we're learning so much and it's wonderful. And I hope you all have a really good weekend. Work hard. Turn in your quizzes, and I will see you on Monday.